It's
Well
almost like
met. This has been Brode, and you're watching Born to be
Cosmo.
Oh, snap.
welcome to Born to be Cosmo, the podcast where we discuss all things Marvel Snap twice monthly. So it's been 2 weeks since we last met, and a day. Thank you all for being so accommodating with your schedules. And, like every time we come and gather around to talk about Snap, a lot has happened. So it won't be boring. Here to talk about this with us, we have a very special guest, a good friend of mine, nhlnjfan1. NHL has been a mainstay of the Wild Hearthstone community for as long as I've been a part of it. Contributes to the Tempo Storm meta snapshot for Wild Hearthstone, and is the head of the THL League in Hearthstone as well. So an accomplished card gamer that's bringing some of that talent over to Snap. So wonderful to have you here, NHL. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And not to be outdone, joining us, as always, is full-time content creator and Twitter baiter, ZombiesGoNomNom. Nice to see you here. Thanks for joining us.
Yep, that's me.
Yep. Gotta call it out, Gotta keep it honest, keep it Cosmo.
Yeah.
And of course, we also have joining us NateWolf, the creator of the Born to be Wild podcast and founder of this fine show, Born to be Cosmo. Nate, always a pleasure to chat, snap with you.
Howdy, friends. It's great to be back. Always a pleasure. So yeah, we got a fun show. It's been a couple of weeks since we've done one, and there's a new card out, some things shaking up, some news to talk about. So it was time to jump back in and gather the Big Brain Collective and do this all again. So happy to be here.
So yeah, I think the place to start is really to talk about kind of where we left off and everything that kind of continued as an output of that conversation. So Mobius, we declared it the manufactured solution to the manufactured problem when it was announced. It released, and it basically became a staple in many decks, warping the metagame. It clearly needed to be changed, but then they murdered the card. And they murdered Mobius after selling a lovely variant as part of a fairly premium bundle on the screen there. Mobius on a jet ski. Those who've seen the show will probably enjoy that image.
For the low price of $100.
Yeah, I passed on it as much as I liked the character in the show. And there was a lot of discussion, particularly those who are engaged with Snap. There were those that were happy to see Mobius taken down a peg so that they could start playing cards like Sarah again or Mr. Negative. There were those who weren't happy because they invested tokens and dollars onto a card that was pretty much universally regarded as something that, one needed to have in their arsenal if they were going to be competitive, right? A lot of content creators like you, Zombies, recommended it as a buy. And then it got gutted and people spent very limited resources on it. And so they were decidedly unhappy. Anyways, all this just to say that there was a patch and Mobius got changed again, largely due to this feedback and outcry.
The outcry was pretty intense. Like I don't know. I don't engage a ton with Twitter these days, and I did, and it kind of blew up, and just a lot of people were upset, and
I've never seen so many people mad since the game came out. I think it's actually the one thing that brought all corners of the community that play this game together. Was like, man, this is some BS.
Almost all. Almost all. I think so. Maybe before we kind of dive into the implications, I'm going to share my thoughts on it, and then I'm curious to hear if you agree or disagree or deviate from it, and then we can kind of drill into the different segments of the player base and their thoughts. So when Mobius was announced, I knew I was going to hate Mobius, and then it released and it was confirmed I hated Mobius, and then it was announced for balanced adjustment, and I was happy to hear that because I think that it was overpowered. But when the card was effectively nuked from orbit, and changed from a ongoing to a one-time occurrence, I kind of I felt for people that invested in it, and I think that those that are upset that their investment was devalued by this balance change doesn't mean that I didn't want to see the card balance, right? These two things can exist, and I think that nuance is probably pretty important to call out. So, how do you guys feel about that? Were you happy to see it nerfed?
Yeah, I'll jump in quickly. I mean, I don't have a huge take on it, but I think the big thing for me, yeah, the card needed to get hit because it was too strong. It was the fact that they had like planned on nerfing it before it was released and then sold $100 bundle with it, like knowing it was going to get gutted. Like, that's just shady. It's not, to me, the change, like, I think that having it as a 3/3 is like where it needs to be, and that's fine. I'm not, I mean, the card.
So what you're referencing, Nate, is that when they nerfed Mobius, they basically said in the patch notes that they released him overtuned, knowing that they would have to claw it back.
Yes,
I think that was a pretty big.
I can't believe they said that.
And I think they're going to be a lot more careful with what they say in the patch notes. Here's the exact quote for Mobius, because it's I think everyone just kind of did a double take, because like if you're trying to like essentially scam people on a card, you would think the last thing you would do is outright tell people, "Hey, I'm trying to scam you." Like, that's just kind of it's like. And for that reason, a lot of people were like, was like this intentional? Is this just like stupidity? Like, I don't understand. And I saw the exact line, where is it? While we were eager to see the world Mobius would create, we expected to make an adjustment down the road in order to welcome cost reduction strategies back into the sunlight. It's like the temporary meta thing is what got a lot of people at the end. It's blah, blah, blah. We're also interested to hear your feedback on our approach here, using a new card as a tool to create a new play environment temporarily. That was the big line that got people, because it's like, well, when you sold me this card, you didn't tell me I was buying into a temporary play environment. You just told me I was buying a card. And now that card, for anyone who didn't see the original nerf of it going to a on reveal instead of ongoing, I think I saw one person play post nerf Mobius, and it was terrible.
It was so bad. Awful. So the two like tweets that I remember seeing after, one of them was from some content creator, and I don't recall who it was, but the idea of it was like, did you guys mean to say that like out loud? Like, you realize you're telling everyone that, right? I don't think that's a good look. And then I think from just the general public was like, well, at least it was only 3,000. It was like they're so used to getting dumped on that it was like, well, at least it wasn't 6K. But like, geez Louise, can you imagine dumping that many resources for a temporary card? Like, that's the idea, right? Oh, hey, we're creating a temporary meta, so we're gonna make this card busted for a month, and then it was
like required to play that card in this temporary meta, right?
Yeah, because they made
of how powerful Loki was. It's like you needed an answer, and Mobius was really the main answer that was provided. And a lot of people wanted them to release the card earlier because we didn't have a proper answer. And unsurprisingly, when you make a card that is very effective stats for the cost that counters or attempts to counter one of the strongest, if not the strongest deck in the game, turns out people are going to play that card, and there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. Who would have thought?
So NHL, I know that you're not free to play, but you are a budget-minded player. You are a sometimes battle pass purchaser. That's kind of really it. On rare occasion, you try to minimize your spend. So, as someone that has limited resources to juggle and someone that acquired Mobius, what was your take on this and your feeling on the change?
Man, it just felt bad from the start. Nothing around Mobius feels good, right? You're forced to get a card to stay competitive if you're a spike, right? So if you don't have the tokens, you're just SOL. There's nothing you can do about it. And then you're falling behind for at least a month, right? Then they go and nerf it. and it feels like that was just the cost of staying competitive for a month. But now that investment is erased, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that still
They're
sucks.
crap, mega crap.
Exactly. Like,
You know,
nothing about Mobius ever felt good to me.
right.
The one time it does feel good, even when I play it, in my opinion, is when there's a cost increasing location that Mobius
Yeah,
is
yeah,
coming from,
yeah.
and that's about it. I get to giggle at my opponent when I play Mobius and Elysium shows up.
Mm-hmm.
But does it really feel that good?
Not
No, it
really.
doesn't change.
Yeah.
It doesn't change my game plan at all. And I think cards that feel that way aren't necessarily that good. I know a lot of people like that kind of disruption stuff, but it's a two-player game. Both players should be able to play the game, and Mobius is effectively stopping one player from playing the game the same way as the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 And that probably contributed. So, like, we obviously we got the Mobius change again, and one of the things they said, which I mean, I think actually makes a lot of sense, is the fact that the reason they went so hard with Mobius was because the early data on him essentially was destroying the Pool 3 player experience. Which, I mean, if you think about the cards people play in Pool 3, a lot of the archetypes are kind of built around cost reduction in a way. Not all, but I'd say a lot of them were. Wave, Negative, Sarah, Zabu, the list goes on.
Or
So, like, I get the concern, but I think it just kind of shows the issue with, like, they shouldn't be making such heavy-handed changes when they know it's not happening for another month. Because as we saw, and as I think they even admitted, the game changed a lot from that first week of Mobius to when the patch hit, to where Mobius was starting to be played a bit less. He was still really, really popular, but he was starting to be played a bit less, and we weren't seeing that same. He was still like very, very strong and shutting out decks, but I don't think it was at the level it was when he first released. And so they realized, oh, hey, we don't have to go as hard with this card, but it was too late. It was already locked in. And my concern, and luckily they seem to have gotten around this with some new technology, was that, well, if they want to change it back or even change it to how they changed it now, I figured we'd have to wait another month because previously OTAs were numbers only changes, right? You can't change the text of a card. And so that added, I think, fuel to the fire because it's like, oh, even if they realize the mistake, they can't correct it for a while, like a month at the earliest, and maybe longer if that patch is already almost locked in. Fortunately, it seems they have some new technology to where they can change things more than numbers. Sounds like it's something they're going to use sparingly for the time being because it's new, and I'm sure there are things that could go wrong with it. But
I mean, they might have just. Well, I wanted to say they like did like a rollback, but they tweaked the mana cost.
Someone actually asked about that.
Oh, interesting.
Was asking, were you able to do this because you had the old version of the card, like the code available? And they basically said no. It's purely because of this new technology.
Yeah,
with
I'm
the
glad
OTAs.
that question was asked because you and I were discussing it, Zombies, and I hypothesized the same thing.
It's a reasonable conclusion to come to, honestly.
So it's good.
So it's
I
cool.
mean,
We found some info
Yeah,
out
good.
about that, and it's good. It's good for future because if something like this happens again, I sure hope it doesn't. But if it did, it alleviates at least one part of the concern of, oh, if they make a really big miss on nerfing or changing a card in its text, we're not necessarily locked into a month of that card. I don't think they're going to do this very often, but when there's a very clear case scenario like Mobius where it's causing a lot more issues than not by leaving it dead for a long period of time, it's good. But I think one thing that's worth noting here is the response, what they did was bad. The response was generally, I think, the best you could have asked for when they were like, hey, you're right, we messed up, we shouldn't have done this, we're taking steps to correct all this stuff. So, that was good.
Wait, can I talk about
think,
the ridiculous thing that happened after it though? Like
sure,
in the creator Discord, like previously when there was a they were announcing changes or they're releasing a news article or hey, here's the upcoming balance changes or whatever. and you can respond with emojis, you know, thumbs up or smiley face or whatever, right? There was like a plus sign for good and a minus sign for bad.
Oh, that was
general
funny.
Snap
That's the
Discord.
general
Yeah.
Discord. That's not the creator one.
Yeah. We need to talk about that though, because that was
really funny. That and in fairness, this was, I think, a more of a fault of the moderation team than the second dinner team, because apparently, from what I understand, the people who run the Discord, it's not actually second dinner running the Discord. They it's an official Discord, but it's not being run by the people who make the game.
Yep.
Which I think is worth noting.
Well, yeah, no, it is.
It's still funny though.
But it was like it was hilarious. So because everybody, I mean, I just bring it up because it was like on the heels of this Mobius thing, because people were so bent out of shape about it, right? For a number of reasons, but essentially, what I'll put the post up on the screen here, but what they said was like, hey, no more bad reactions. We only want good reactions. So if you like it, then you can leave us a plus or a thumbs up or whatever. But if you don't like it, just don't comment at all.
Yeah, don't say you don't get positive feedback only. There's no negative reaction in bossing say.
One of those,
you know,
balls belongs to me.
Yeah, people were really mad about this, and so they did turn that around and change it. They did remove negative feedback from the team answer stuff, which I think you can make a reasonable argument for. Like, I'm not personally in favor, but like I can understand how, you know, when people are answering questions earnestly and they're getting hit with a bunch of negative reactions because people don't like the answer, it doesn't mean the answer was bad. It just means people didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I think that could discourage communication. So I can understand removing it from like the answer stuff, but removing it from the feedback was absurd. And I'm glad they changed that. It was honestly silly that it
just felt like
such to begin with.
It just felt like such a little baby thing to do. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying it never feels good to be like dumping on the devs, and I think it's fine to provide critical feedback, especially if it's constructive, you know. If it's just complaining, that's one thing, or, you know, or we don't want to be calling people names or making it personal. But if you disagree, like if they do something dumb and then you want to like express your displeasure with it, like it shouldn't be express your positivity or express nothing. Like, those are the two choices. No more expressing that you're dissatisfied with this. Like, we're literally talking about like a plus sign and a minus sign, and you took away the minus sign. Like, that's it. It was just such a baby thing to do. Like, it right hot on the heels of the Mobius thing, that I was like, what is happening? It was just silly. I don't, you know, particularly want to get in the middle of it. I thought that the Mobius thing was kind of shady. I'm glad that I just don't want them to nuke the card. I think it needed to get hit, and I'm glad that it got hit. I don't want it to get hit to the point of unplayability when resources are that scarce. When you're spending even 3,000 tokens on a card, like they Warsong Commandered it. When they made it as an honor reveal, it was unplayable. It was so bad. It was like giga trash. And so bad. When they said, hey, we changed our mind, we're rolling it back, it's going to be now a 3/3 instead of a 2/3, but the same effect ongoing. It's like, okay, that's probably what it should have been to begin with, and that's the nerf that would have like been acceptable in the beginning. Like, okay, it was released a little bit fine-tuned and we just tweaked it by 1 mana. Like, okay, but it was just the way that it all happened and the communication around it. I didn't buy the bundle. I don't typically wail out too hard, especially like while I'm looking for a job, but like, good grief.
I think like when I measure these things and trying to be objective, I think there's a few competing interests that are colliding. And so my general feedback would be, I want the balance team to make balanced decisions based on gameplay, not other external factors. And until the core issue is addressed, that anytime there's a balance change or a new card announced, that immediately the conversation drifts towards spend, acquisition, and agency, you're always going to have this problem, right? Whether it's done intentionally or not, you know, I'm not weighing in on that. I have my own opinions, but I think that if, for example, there was some kind of mechanism into place to either mitigate the loss of the people who invested in Hearthstone, they do that via refunds. I don't know what. Or to what Zombie suggested, just not making changes, which I don't like either. But until you remove the economy, the game economy and card acquisition system from the conversation, this is going to continue to be a problem. And it may not have the same blast radius as this one. This one was pretty bad, but it will keep happening, and we're going to keep grumbling about it. And I hope that they can take that feedback and hopefully do something with it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's the big thing about this was I think the acquisition is the thing that made people most mad about it. Like, people are mad about a good card becoming a bad card, but I think the acquisition and the fact that they just straight up told us, like, hey, we were kind of always planning to do this or whatever, I think that's what set people over the edge, right?
Well,
and it's not really surprising because that
let me
it'd
ask
be
you,
less of a big deal if it didn't come at such a high cost.
Yeah, if the card
it makes it a much bigger deal for sure. Because like if it was less expensive to get these cards, like people wouldn't need to feel as secure in their investment, and that kind of leads to what I wanted to say originally, which was even though I think what they did was bad and the response was good, I think overall they're in a net like loss of trust from their player base. I don't think doing even what they did to fix it is generally correct. I don't think that magically restores the consumer confidence that was lost. I think this was by far the most damaging thing they've ever done to hit consumer confidence.
More than Nexus events?
Since release, I should clarify.
All right.
Nexus is the most, but like that was most people didn't know. Most people don't even know what Nexus events are.
Sure.
I don't count that as much, even though I think that's a fun topic for another time. But I think post-release, I have never seen people so angry about something. And the big like indicator to me that there was a lot of consumer confidence lost is I have never seen myself and others get so many questions about, hey, Werewolf by Night just came out. This card looks powerful. I kind of want it, but it seems good, and I think they're going to throw it into the sun because it's good. And then I'm going to be out 6,000 tokens, and I'm going to feel bad. What do I do? And it's like, how do I answer that question? Because I have no more information than they do.
Yeah, I had a massive like Twitter exchange with a lot of people on that exact topic, and it's just I've got some trepidation. Like, this card looks really good. I think NHL said it in a conversation in the Discord, was like, look, here's what it feels like anyways. They released, there's two types of cards that are new releases, right? They're like either busted or they're trash, right? and Werewolf by Night is busted. I mean, it's just really good. And so when you look at it and you're like, well, this is a little bit too good. Is it worth my 6K? Well, in its current state, yeah, but with this track record, we don't have a lot of trust that it's going to stay this way. And so we're going to spend 6,000 tokens on it, or a bunch of collector spotlight caches that we don't have, or because they're such a rare resource, knowing that it's probably going to get hit. And then you've got the people saying, well, you should know that it's going to get hit before you even buy it. So just
I don't like
and
that.
It's like,
you should have known better argument. That doesn't sit well with me.
I think that's stupid.
So, I think that the bottom line is that nobody here is not saying that we didn't want the card to be balanced. We wanted the card to be balanced. We just don't like the sequencing of events, because at the end of the day, it erodes trust. And my feedback is, you know what? I want them to make, decisions for the game that are fun, but not if it's going to come at such a high cost with acquisition. So unless anyone has anything they really want to speak to, there was actually quite a few changes in the patch, so I thought we'd move on to that. But before we do, does anyone have any final thoughts about our good friend Mobius Mobius?
So I don't want to say anything about Mobius, but I want to touch on Werewolf by Night since Nate was mentioning it.
Sure.
I kind of disagree. I think looking back, they kind of hit the sweet spot with that card. That was a rare win.
Yeah, I'd agree. I
didn't want to say it. I think Werewolf by Night's busted. I think it's just probably one of the most skill intense cards they've released. Like every time I bring it on ladder, I regret it because I screw it up.
Yeah,
So
it's
I think
not
that's
that
what's
easy to
holding
play.
it down, not its power level. That's an opinion. I don't have facts to back that up, but I how I feel.
That's kind of where I'm going with this, though. The thing is, Werewolf by Night looks super strong if you play against a good player, right? But the thing is, even in higher ranks, I don't think it's that strong in most archetypes. It's a rare sight now. And it's kind of because the best deck for it has historically been an unpopular deck and a very skill-intensive deck at this point now in Bounce. I think Bounce is one of the best decks right now, but no one ever really plays it because Bounce has been historically underplayed, and no one wants to spend the tokens for Werewolf by Night. If you play Bounce with Werewolf by Night right now, and you really take the time to learn the deck, I guarantee you'll hit Infinite easily right now.
So I bought Werewolf by Night, even though I knew it, I was taking a risk. So I accepted that risk, and I was fine with it. And I played a bunch of the bounce version with it, the not Loki version. And yeah, it was a player's skill issue. I had to put the deck on the shelf because it was time to climb, and I just can't get it done with this. And I've played a lot of bounce in the past, and this certainly ratchets up the difficulty quite a bit. So
it's just different, right? Like there's a lot more. It reminds me of Loki in a way where it's like it's one of the few decks you actually have to manage your board space effectively because you're playing a lot of cards. And then the werewolf takes up a spot on the board, so you have to be. This is one of the rare few decks that rewards playing ahead a lot, or like planning ahead a lot. Because if you don't think about it, you're suddenly losing points on the werewolf, and you're not setting yourself up for the next turn right. And it's like I think the Darkhawk bounce version with it is what's gotten most popular, and it's really good. But like, if you don't pilot it correctly, it will not be really good. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to pilot, frankly. The other thing is like, I think there were a lot of people who were calling the card overpowered, but the thing that I think makes this card like a win is the fact that you don't need to build your deck, or do need rather to build your deck around this effect. Because if you don't, like, at least you can't just put this in every deck, basically. Like if you just put this in every deck, you're not going to have a very good time. Because it doesn't work in every deck. That's just not what the card is designed to do, And I think that's good. Like you don't want a Elsa or a Jeff for all of your cards. You want cards to be unique and do unique things and not become, because when you have auto includes in a 12 deck game, it homogenizes deck building like crazy, which is not very fun for most
like
people.
Like a 2/3 Mobius.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but I kind of agree that I do think the change there is actually a win, because it's just very it's just a rare example of like finding a good spot for the card where it's like it's strong but it doesn't feel like overbearingly strong. I think some people get frustrated with it because it's not the easiest thing to hit with tech cards. Like, if you aren't gaining priority versus the werewolf deck, it's really hard to hit it with a Shadow King or a Shang-Chi. But I think that's really where a lot of the complaints come from people, because they're like, oh, I want to use my tech card, but if I'm playing from behind, I have to predict where the werewolf is going, and you can't really reliably do that. But I think it is a rather balanced, well-made card that's fun to play.
So, on the subject of Shang-Chi, that was the theme of the patch, outside of Mobius, of course, which I think that horse has been turned to tartar.
Well, so, wait, can I say one last thing about Mobius?
Yeah, of course.
Because, like, we didn't talk about it too much as a 3/3. I guess we did a little, but, like, I think 3/3 is kind of just the perfect spot for this card, where it makes an impact, but kind of like NHL said earlier, like, this card, I played this card a lot, because I was playing an ongoing list. And the thing I noticed the most was it had the most impact versus locations rather than what my opponent was playing. And I think that speaks to why you're not seeing the card very much. I've literally not played against a single person playing Mobius since the change. A lot of people were scared he was going to come back as this auto include, and I understand being worried about that. But like, I think those fears were they were overblown because people aren't playing this card very much. Has a very like strict, like it just does nothing versus a lot of decks, and a 3/3 do nothing is a lot worse than a 2/2 do nothing. So I think they actually hit it kind of where they need to for the change.
It's kind of still feels kind of dead. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I don't think it's very good anymore, but
it's a lot better than it was as an on reveal, basically.
Oh yeah, that's not... for sure. Yeah.
And it's also like meta context too, because outside of Loki, this isn't really hitting anything that's super relevant right now. Like
She-Hulk.
you could say, yeah, I guess you could say She-Hulk or maybe Zabu, but the Zabu decks get a turn of Zabu now that this costs 3.
Right.
So even if it hits Zabu, it's not invalidated. You could say, oh, it hits Death and Destroy, but Destroy does a lot of strong things even without Death. And you have to factor in there's a cost to playing this card. Playing a 2/3, there was not much cost to playing that. There is a very real cost to playing a 3/3. It's like, it's crazy how different that is. It is incredibly different. I think not enough people give that credit, but it's because you can't weave it in anymore. You can't like play a Mobius on turn 5 with a 3-drop, right? You can only play a 2-drop. It's been very impactful in my experience.
Well, let's But let's take a look at these other balance changes while we're at it.
We'll keep an eye on Mobius, I think. This is a topic that isn't going away, so stay tuned for more ranting about Mobius and the game economy. So yeah, the big change I think in the patch really was around Shang-Chi. So Shang-Chi was changed, nerfed, I suppose, to destroying 10 power cards adjacent from him at the location instead of 9. So basically, Shang-Chi won't kill Chavez anymore. But there were a bunch of other changes that were made along with Shang-Chi to, I suppose, rebalance or retune the numbers. So Monster from Monster Island, the location, is now a 6/10 instead of a 6/9. And a couple cards were buffed to have their break points increased from 8 to 9. And that was Jessica Jones. So she's now a 4/5 instead of a 4/4. So she'll go to 4/9 instead of 4/8. So pretty good buff, especially for an early card that people tend to use early on in their journey. But Warpath is now going to gain +5 power instead of +4 as it's ongoing. So it takes it into Shang-Chi range, although it makes a fairly narrow card slightly probably overall better. She-Hulk, and I think this is the one that had a lot of discussion around it, although for the wrong reasons once again, being buffed, or I should say reverted, from a 6/9 to a 6/10. The reason why this was the subject of much conversation is because, one, there was a She-Hulk bundle that was or is still on sale in the store, so buff ahead of the sale. And also the change from Mobius being a 2/3 on reveal to a 3/3 ongoing was made in advance of the patch's release by about 2 or 3 days, depending on your time zone, because they didn't want people to perceive that they were going to again be getting bait and switched with the She-Hulk bundle. So fascinating how things have to be, how game balance has to be communicated around game economy. That's bad. That needs to stop. And finally, in my opinion, the last change, Stronguy went from being a 4/4 ongoing. If you have no cards in your hand, or your hand is empty, gains +6 power, making it a 4/10 to a 3/3. 3/3 ongoing. Your hand is empty, +6 power. So this gets under Shang-Chi, and also potentially puts it in a new class of decks with the 3 cost and being on the lower end of the curve. Those were the Shang-Chi related changes and the power buffs and increases and decreases. finally, the last change, this is a big patch, a Doctor Strange was buffed from being a 3/3 to a 2/3, I guess in the hopes of making Doctor Strange potentially be relevant the same way that Shadow King, was changed from a 3 to a 2 cost card and it became a staple. So, lot of changes. I'm sure there's lots of thoughts on this. For me, I'll keep it really brief. To me, with the Shang-Chi change kind of underscores some of the challenges we have with a living card game or a live service card game that is still under the belief 1 year in that there will be no rotation. And so power creep power levels have to be constantly adjusted. And in a way, this feels like it's less a balance change and more changing the breakpoints in the game for what's to come. And I have mixed feelings about that. I've seen other games try to not introduce a rotation. Legends of Runeterra was probably the most famous one, at least as a digital card game, and eventually they did have to introduce rotation. I wonder if Snap's gonna go down the same trajectory. So far, I'm yet to see a card game that could do without rotation. That said, for better or worse, Snap is unlike any other card game I've ever played, so I don't want to predict the future. But this kind of change piques my interest. It worries me as to what may come. As for the effect on the game presently, fine. I think Shang-Chi is still a good card. I still run it. She-Hulk's felt good to play. I don't know. It feels like it's been not super impactful outside of a couple of breakpoints. Chavez, Shang-Chi, probably the biggest one. So anyways, Mr. Wolf, a lot of changes. What are your thoughts? I think you're muted, Nate.
Thank you. I'm still getting over this cold, and I have to cough sometimes. And so I always mute the mic so I don't cough like in HD into everyone's ears. Yeah, no, I think that this is fine overall. I think the trickiest piece for me is just getting used to the new power levels for these cards with Shang-Chi. So like what Shang-Chi hits versus what Shang-Chi doesn't hit, it is a little bit tricky until we're used to it again. But aside from that, I mean, Stronguy is not really even a card.
But you can play it in Silver Surfer now.
I saw a Silver Surfer discard deck. It looked ambitious, but it looked potentially possible, right? Sword Master and other amazing 3-cost discard cards.
Oh dear. Yeah, no, aside from this, I mean, Jessica Jones, that's cool. Warpath, whatever. Doctor Strange, okay, whatever. Like it's fine. I think the trickiest part for me is just getting used to the new what does Shang-Chi kill and what doesn't Shang-Chi kill?
Have you thrown an 8-cuber thinking Shang was going to kill the 9 power cards?
No, I'm sure a lot of people have.
It's not yet. Honestly, I haven't been really running Shang-Chi, and I've been playing a bunch of like Miss Marvel Lockdown to rank 90, and then I switched over to this high Evo thing, and I'm just not running Shang-Chi, but I'm tempted to. But yeah, I know it's going to mess me up until I get used to it again. That's I mean, we were having that conversation in the Discord earlier in the week, but like, yeah, it's fine. I don't really have any big thoughts, and not to like, I don't know, like I'm sure somebody else has something more interesting to say, but these seem fine to me.
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of the more boring weeks, to be honest. The Mobius change, I mean, we went over it. The Doctor Strange change, it's good, but how many people are wanting to play Move right now? I don't know. I still don't think. I think it's a good change that is for a bad archetype, or an archetype that just isn't there right now. So it's fine. The Shang-Chi change is cool mainly for the fact that now they have a wider range of stuff to experiment with. I always thought it was kind of an issue that they're working with smaller numbers. Like it was always kind of dumb to me that like 8 was the magic number of like, hey, this dodges the tech. I think like making the double-digit number the number that gets hit by tech and is universally viewed as like the big things just makes more sense to me. Which it's kind of like a silly thing, but like I think that has some value. And now like 9 power cards like Rescue or the new Jessica Jones or Evolved Abomination, like these cards actually have a purpose to exist rather than just being a worse thing that gets hit by Shang. Like before, they didn't really have much purpose, because if you're gonna be opening yourself up to getting hit by Shang, you should just run a bigger card, you know? So I like that change for that reason. The She-Hulk change, it was a reversion that made sense, right? Like She-Hulk is no longer the crazy powerhouse she once was. It seems fine to bring her back. Stronguy doesn't really matter. Jessica change is cool because I've always liked that card. Now she's a little bit better. But kind of aside from like Shang and reverting Mobius, it felt uneventful to me, which isn't really a bad thing, but like,
Is
I
the
don't know.
rescue buff you've been waiting for, though? That's the big question for me.
It's really funny because I've like wanted to play rescue, and then I go to play rescue, and I'm just like, most of the time I think I'd just rather play Jessica Jones.
Wow. Yeah.
I think that card still needs something done to it, and I think I'd imagine they're probably in agreement about that. Like I don't think anyone was expecting, oh, rescue doesn't get hit by Shang, she's finally saved. I don't think that's the case.
Oh, no, but that was a big part of the conversation.
Maybe it helps, but it doesn't. I don't think it helps enough. Is the thing.
Maybe they need to Stronguy rescue, make it a 3-drop, and like kind of lower its threshold a little bit. Maybe that would do something.
Yeah, I think it'd be, if nothing else, it'd be a more interesting card as a 3-drop.
Rescue's problem is fundamental. You're expected to fight for at least 2 lanes, but Rescue tells you to fight for only 1.
Yeah, it's just overcommitting most of the time, right? Like it's committing a lot, unless you're spreading your power out with small things. Like if you have 1 turn 5 play and they know you're going to play in the rescue lane, they just go for the other 2 lanes, right?
There's a solution to this, but it means fundamentally changing the card. You have to grant power to the other location if you play in that same location. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
That's a change to make her playable. If you want to see her play, like even +3 power in each other location will be enough. But you need to disperse that extra power that she offers. If you don't, then no one's going to play her.
So what you're telling me is that Claw is a better card than Rescue.
Presently, yes. And I hate Claw. But
that's why I said it, Zombies. I was just trying to trigger you.
It's she's just not very good, and I agree. I mean, a while ago, one of the ideas I had for changing it, which it's probably way too much to be honest, but it's I was wondering, like, what if you just gave? I think it'd be more thematic if she gave the buff to a different card, but then you run into Brood again, and it gets a little scary. So I don't know if that's the correct way to go or not.
Well, I think that with the changes to the mechanism of being able to push text changes out on the OTA, maybe they're going to go back to the OTA being more focused on balance and the actual client patch being more content. I think that this really didn't have an impact on the meta. But maybe to shift gears a little bit, and we can talk about a card that has this month's Battle Pass card, and I think in this case, although we're about a week in, I think it's fair to say that it's a powerful card, Miss Marvel, but perhaps not to the extent of Loki and release Elsa and release Loki.
I think she's a Nebula.
Yeah,
she's kind of like a Nebula, where it's like it's very strong but a counterable effect, and like I don't know, I was pretty down on the card before it came out, but after playing with it kind of ticks all the boxes I want a season pass card to tick. It's like it's strong, but it's not overbearingly strong. It doesn't go in every deck because some decks can't make use of her effect because they run too many of the same cost cards. But it's not such a it's not a restriction that's really so hard to hit, like only 1 or 2 decks can run it, which I think is a big benefit in terms of getting to play the card more. Like, I don't know, I think this is what you want from a season pass card. Strong, but not like so strong it is making for a bad experience playing the game. Although some people I'm sure would argue the opposite, because what it has done is it has pushed a lot of people to play Lockdown, and I don't mind Lockdown. A lot of people do not share that opinion, though. A lot of people hate Lockdown more than they hated Galactus or Loki or whatever other deck. So for those people, I think they're probably not having such a good time. But you know, if you're not that bothered by people, and it's not like it's all locked down. Like some people are running ongoings. Like there's variety in what you see the card played in.
I would say that the lockdown's probably at least 10 to 15% of the meta presently.
It's a lot, and we also know that they have been stricter on lockdown in the past. I'm just hoping we don't see any more lockdown cards get just stray nerfed because they decided to make this card. Someone asked about Professor X a while ago, and I know it's something a lot of people have been theorizing. It was like, oh, do we think they're going to hit Professor X because he's like the last big lockdown enabler? And from the last time they decided to comment on it, it didn't really sound like they like that Professor X, unlike the old Spider-Man, there's downside to the card, right? Like sometimes you X a lane and you lose that lane, and then it is really hard to win. And also X, you know, it's happening on turn 4, turn 5, you can leave. But I think really the big thing that they emphasized was the fact that you can X and guess wrong, and then all of a sudden you're in a really bad spot. I think it makes it more likely that this card or that card will survive or it'll dodge the nerf bat because of that. Sounds like.
I hope you're right. I'm a Professor X enjoyer, but you know, we've seen complaints result in cards being nerfed that maybe weren't deserving of it. I think the other feature with this card is that it's not something that's a general utility card like Elsa. It's more of a build around. And you know, when you're pushing power into other lanes, locking them down is core to that strategy. And I think that, you know, the present metagame, we'll talk about the other decks in a second that kind of are seeing play alongside this. But before we went live, NHL, you were talking a little bit about why you think lockdown as an archetype is good for the game. And I thought that was really interesting. And I'm hoping you might feel so inclined to revisit that, because perhaps it might sway someone who's not fond about lockdown to at least appreciate kind of the cornerstone of you know, how different archetypes offset each other.
Yeah, so the thing with this lockdown deck that Marvel is encouraging is that, one, it's not the strongest deck in the game. Two, it's not really warping anything. And three, it's possible to play around, right? So like you guys have covered a lot of Marvel's bases, like how it's what you want to see. It's strong, but not super overbearing. Like some other season pass cards we've had the last few months. You know, all these good signs. And the thing with this lockdown deck, right? It's cheap enough for higher collection level players to probably have the deck, but it's not the best. It's not the strongest deck in the game. It's not going to be something that pushes other strategies out. When I say this, it doesn't have a very polarizing matchup spread. Things are very even against it, right? So like people complain about Professor X, but really Professor X isn't too hard to play around, right? If you know what you're playing into, then you can plan for it. If you see Daredevil, you know turn 5 they're planning Professor X, right? And you can spread your stuff out. If you see more ongoing stuff like Mr. Fantastic, then you know they're probably going to try dropping Miss Marvel in the middle, which means you can set up an Echo, or if you don't have the pool 5 card, you run Enchantress to play on turn 5 or turn 6 to shut down their extra power, right? That way you don't have to play around certain things. Jep is a very popular Series 5 card that a lot of people have gotten over the last few months, and that's another way to get around this deck's game plan, right?
Yeah.
So all these different ways and strategies to give yourself an edge over this deck if you really want it, while also allowing players who want to play it to win games, is very healthy. I think something balanced like this is just a very solid addition to the game.
Did you end up buying the Battle Pass this month?
No, but that's more because of other reasons.
Fair enough.
If your collection is lacking and you really want to win a lot of games and get to infinite, you know, be more competitive, this is probably the month to buy. The thing with the previous months is while those cards were absolutely busted, you still needed some very strong cards to get by. So you had to wait until Snowguard and Mobius for Loki. Those were just always around. With with Elsa, the move deck was on top, so you had to get a lot of high-end move cards like Silk. You also had to play Alioth, right? All these series 4 and 5 cards.
She works well with budget decks, right? Yeah, I think I saw someone saying that too. Like, if you're a lower pool player, she's probably going to be a powerhouse if you're a newer player who's in pool 1 or 2 or maybe early pool 3. You can build around this card effectively without having to actually own a lot of the other powerful, relevant cards in the game. Because, like, what? Professor X is a pool 2 card. Like, Storm is a pool 2 card. Like, they're all the cards that support this, for the most part, are cheap cards. You don't need to have an extensive collection to make it work, which is, I think we need more of that, honestly.
And the important thing, too, is this card isn't overwhelming in those lower pools either, because the counter is there as well.
Yeah, you have your Enchantress, right? Like,
right.
People can... It's funny, I'm surprised how little I've seen people playing Enchantress relative to the fact that, like, there are so many people playing ongoing decks right now. So it's interesting that a lot of people haven't seemed to want... although I will say Echo has taken off a ton, so maybe that's kind of like a bias of the people I play against. But it's been really, like, I just bought the card finally because I'm like, I'm seeing so much ongoing. This card finally has a purpose, which it's cool when they make it so cards that previously, I mean, I was not an Echo fan, but now the tide is shifted and it's like, oh, it's kind of reasonable. You just plop it down in the middle and suddenly your opponent's Miss Marvel decks get a lot less value. And it's interesting. If only it was, more accessible, but like you said, it's not like there isn't a counter available if you really want to counter this archetype.
Right, and the last thing I wanted to touch on was the population. This deck is dominating ladder as much as season pass cards.
It's like all the different archetypes combined on Untapped has it at about a 30%, which is, pretty common when pass cards are well received.
Right, and it's only going to go down as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that with Loki, right? Like, even though he's still incredibly powerful, it surprises me just how much his play rate has declined. And I wonder if part of that is just, people are tired of it and they want to try, the new hotness, the new season pass card, right? It's kind of interesting.
Here's the thing. Loki still hovered above 30% in October, a month after the season pass card. That was a problem.
Oh, it was a huge problem. Right. But it was also because, like, the Elsa deck was the Loki deck, right? Or one of the best Elsa decks was a Loki deck.
Yeah.
Right?
But the fact that it's still that high is concerning because you want people to move on, right?
For sure.
Miss Marvel doesn't look like she's going to have that same impact in December.
Oh, yeah, probably not. I would be very, very surprised if we saw the play rate we see of the card right now maintain in December. I think that's very unlikely.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing for variety as well.
It
signals that it's a very healthy card.
Yeah, no, it's been... as someone who is a Miss Marvel hater before she came out, I have been very pleasantly surprised with both playing with and against the card. Like, I found it to be rather enjoyable to play with and play against, which is... I think that just speaks to it being a pretty well-balanced card.
Yeah, I think the meta's okay right now. I feel like it's pretty narrow. So, I think that this isn't the best deck, but it's probably one that you're going to see very often and you will need a game plan for. Some people are starting to run Echo. I've done some experimentation with Echo. Others are running Rogue. I think that could also be okay. Enchantress probably is better than Rogue, but I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. But if this is not the best deck in the game, what is? Oh, okay, I'll answer my own question. I think it's still Loki. And I think that we're not seeing Loki have a high play rate anymore for a couple of reasons. One, I think that the best versions are running Werewolf by Night. And I touched upon it earlier that I think maybe a lot are loath to admit it, but Werewolf by Night's kind of tricky. Loki's kind of tricky. The deck has become probably one of the more skill-intensive that this game has ever seen. So you're probably seeing less of it, particularly on the middling and bottom segments of ladder. I don't see much Loki at all. I run into one on occasion, but it's maybe once a night, pretty infrequent. Do you all agree that you think Loki's still the best deck? Or is there another one that you think might have surpassed it?
I think it's either the best or tied for the best, if it's not the best. Like, I think the Darkhawk bounce stuff has been making a lot of noise recently, or making a lot of waves, and I think that deck is really, really good, but much like Loki, it's only really, really good if you're very competent at playing
It frustrates me to hear you say that. Do you want it? Okay, this is going to be a Born to be Cosmo exclusive. Do you want to know what my win rate is on ladder with the Darkhawk bounce Werewolf by Night deck?
Yeah,
this
sure.
season is?
Huh.
All right, here it is. Drum roll, people. 1 in 10, minus 10 cubes.
Jeez.
Skill issue.
I did catch a couple bad beats, but honestly, it totally is. I do not feel comfortable playing it. So I'm hoping that one of you big brains will show me what I'm doing wrong. I saw you put some tips in the group chat there, NHL, so I'll give them a read after. But it kind of frustrates me to hear you say that, because I can't put up numbers with that deck. So I'm gonna go cry in the corner now.
Don't worry, I'm mostly joking. Anyone can have bad breaks with the deck, even the best deck in the game. But
yeah, but I felt the struggle. It wasn't quick. You can tell when it's not clicking. It wasn't. I feel like the deck has a very limited power ceiling, and there's a lot of point slammy things going on, so you got to manage that pretty well.
Right.
All right. Well, that's interesting that you think that the Darkhawk bounce deck might be tied with Loki, and they have similar. They're both kind of doing the bounce thing. So I suppose that does make sense.
Yeah, it's just Hawk has more disruption, and I think that disruption's valuable. I think disruption is really very good right now, because not only are you proactively advancing your own game plan, you're making it more difficult for your opponent to do their game plan. But that's why I think it's like one of the strong contenders right now. It's just good disruption, and when you deny 2 draws by bouncing a Black Widow, I think it's one of the grossest things you can do in the game right now. Is you're giving your opponent rocks, you're denying draws, you're getting a payoff for it, and you're also just playing like reasonably statted cheap cards that are like pumping up this werewolf. It's also why like I think the best version of Loki is probably still the werewolf Loki, but that one is much, much harder to play than your stock Loki, because there's much more. The werewolf decks just have a lot of room for error, and they're very punishing when you make a mistake is the big thing. Like, a lot of decks have, room for error and you can make mistakes and whatnot, but not as many of them punish you really hard when you make those mistakes. It's kind of like, remember when Thanos was really broken with Lockjaw beginning of the year? That deck had a high skill cap to play perfectly, but it was so strong, you could play it imperfect 99% of the time and still just have crazy results. And that's just like the complete opposite with this deck, where it's like if you make even one mistake, sometimes that might contribute to, a slightly smaller werewolf that no longer wins you a game. So it's actually like it matters a lot more making mistakes with these decks now, and I think that's in part what is keeping them down in popularity, aside from card acquisition stuff keeping them down too. But either people don't want to learn, or they get frustrated while learning, or I think with Loki, like, we had the kind of narrative that Loki was just like an instant win kind of deck, right? Where you had this huge advantage just playing Loki, and then when people lose with it, they're like, oh, like they get very frustrated because of it's not matching with their expectation of like, oh, I should be favored because I'm playing this overpowered deck. And yeah, it's I think it's good when you have decks like this near the top, because naturally they just won't be super represented, because people just don't learn to play them optimally a lot of the time, it seems.
Well, and there's a good reason why they don't, because the next deck that I think bears mentioning as being among the best, and this really I don't think is controversial, is Shuri Red Skull. I mean, when you look at win rate versus percent played, Shuri Red Skull is still number one and Interrobang, who we had on 2 weeks ago, he basically rushed to infinite in a couple hours, just jamming Shuri Red Skull. I mean, kind of was doing it almost as a point of pride, because in his meta snapshot on CCG Hub, I believe as recently as this Saturday was still rating it the best deck. And when Interrobang rates decks, he adds ease of play and population into his weighting. Obviously, there's some art that goes along with the science. This isn't purely data driven, but I mean, considering the play rate is pretty healthy. This was taken a couple of hours ago. It's since updated, but it's hovering around 4.5 to 5%, with a win rate between 56 and 58%. That's sure.
Yeah, it's the other side of the coin, right? Like, it's the other side of the, I just want a deck that I know is effective, and I can know very easily when to snap, when to not, what amount of power I'm outputting and where. And that's Shuri in a nutshell, right? And that's why I think they're always going to want this deck to stick around in some form or another, because a lot of people, they're just players who like that play pattern. It's like, I don't want to be a super 5-head moving my cards around the board and planning positioning. I just want to slam some big dudes on the board and win. And Shuri's very effective at doing that, and especially when, I mean, he started to come back, but for a while there, Shang-Chi was on a hiatus, and I mean, Shuri loves that, right? When Shang-Chi is out, Shuri gets to go whole hog. So I'm not surprised it's still doing very well. Because I feel like there aren't a lot of decks that are as straightforward as Shuri is, in terms of just like, I feel like you could teach Shuri to a 5-year-old in like an hour or something. Like, it's really, it's simple.
Series 3 now, right? It's a pretty
and it's a budget friendly deck. Like, I'm pretty sure all the cards in Shuri, except for there are some that run Alioth. I'm not as big of a fan of those ones, but some people run it. But the stock Shuri list with like Sauron and whatnot, it's a pool 3 only deck.
Well, Shuri Red Skull still putting up numbers up and down ladder. The other deck that's kind of seen a little bit of a renaissance in terms of both win and play rate is High Evolution, and specifically High Evolution builds that are running Magic with She-Hulk, which just was recently buffed, and Infinite. I think that this is an interesting deck. I've been playing it. I was playing Thanos up until 90, kind of like the Thanoses we were playing last season. But the deck got noticeably worse because one of the main win cons is Professor X, and even though Professor X is very good with Miss Marvel as a synergistic combo, it's also very good at disrupting your opponent's Professor X. In this case, mine. Although I mitigated that somewhat by adding Echo to the deck, and that was kind of what you were saying before. Just throw Echo and Thanos, and you kind of now have like a bit of a hedge against Miss Marvel. It worked quite well. But I've been having a tough week, and I didn't want to think, but I didn't quite get to the level of wanting to eat paste. I wanted like a hat here. So this was that. I've been playing this specific build on screen. However, I am thinking of making one change. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I feel like Shocker has been pretty underwhelming. So I'm probably gonna try some leech action in that slot. Otherwise, I've seen other people running Jeff, and I think that Jeff's always good, especially when Professor X is all over ladder. I really like that the deck runs Cosmo, and I think that the MVP of High Evo is still Cyclops. Cyclops can just turn matchups on its head. It's just a great. And
no one's running Luke Cage anymore, right? Like, I feel like that was one of those things that pushed High Evo out a bit, was when Luke Cage was going in every deck under the sun. It's like, why would I ever play a High Evo deck when everyone's running this tech card that kills what I do? I will say, and I know you're not going to like me for saying it, I have been very, very impressed with what Man-Thing in High Evo. Slightly different. So instead of going the Infinite route, and I think I don't run Shocker either, but the idea is you got to run the Abomination, which has been pretty good. Yeah. And you basically only use Cyclops and Man-Thing, and it's enough to make a really cheap Abomination. And there's just so many decks right now that are playing all these small cards. And
Loki.
like, and I don't run Luke Cage in it. You just have to kind of play around where you're putting the Man-Thing, because then Loki can't steal your Luke Cage, and they don't have an answer to this Man-Thing. And Man-Thing absolutely demolishes Loki and Thanos boards because they have all these cheap cards, and they're often like 2 or 3 power at most. And so you're just taking away most of their power while getting down a 5-drop or a 5 power card. It's been really impressive to me in Evo. I've really kind of liked it.
Yeah, I don't have anything against Man-Thing. I know you're trying to take a jab at me. My problem with Man-Thing
is buying it for tokens.
It's the cost, right? I mean, I think that I hate to always kind of drift the conversation in this direction, but there's an easy fix: make card acquisition have more agency and bring the cost down to something perhaps a little less insane. But yeah, I haven't gotten Man-Thing based on that alone, and maybe the next time I open Spotlights, I'll get it, and I'll be happy to see it. That's how I got Echo, and I'm happy that I have Echo. It just it's like my unique collection has blessed me with Echo instead of Man-Thing. So perhaps if your unique collection has blessed you with Man-Thing, then this might be something to charge. I've seen you play that deck, and I like it. It's just another cheap thing to discount. So I think that's pretty cool. I'll say the Infinite has worked. It's a bit telegraphed. It's a bit clunky. It's really good when you queue into a bot, because when you skip your turn 5 or your turn 6, the bot will oftentimes snap. So you can really, on your ladder climb, take advantage of the bots. Some decks kind of put their stats out early and they're not as good into bots. This one can with the 3 scaling 1-drops. Generally, you've got that big power swing. I don't know if I'm going to finish the climb with this. I'm kind of hoping that one of the good gamers in this chat will show me how to play Werewolf by Night. I kind of like the card. It kind of feels bad that I'm struggling with it. But I think this is a fine choice if you want to be a little bit like, want a mid-shelf brain dead deck, instead of like the floor, which is Shuri Red Skull. It's a been a pretty good time, and there's some flex slots in it. I know you've been playing it, Nate, as well. What list have you been running?
Yeah, pretty similar. I think the one I've been running is it's almost identical to this one. I had the picture up not too long ago, but it's the same idea here. It's
Were you running Leech? I think you said you were running Leech.
Yeah.
You're running Leech and Rogue. All right, it's a little bit more tech.
Rogue has been a little underwhelming, but it was just there for the Miss Marvel stuff, right? And Leech actually is great. Leech has won a lot of games because people think they're gonna Shang-Chi you on the final turn, or they're gonna do something cute on the final turn, and when you Leech them like
Goliath.
I've had people like I had to shut off the emotes. I always forget sometimes. Like I try to like auto squelch like right at the start, and sometimes I forget, and I always like never cease to be amazed at how
expressive Marvel Snap players are. Exactly. And by expressive, I mean big freaking jerks. Like
they're so bad. But the people that get leeched, it's like. Those are the ones that are like, they're like, Miss Marvel, like thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up.
I'm doing it.
And then you leech them, and then they like rope you that final turn.
Yeah.
It's just people get so mad, and I never thought leech would be playable after it got hit, but it does some work in this deck. It's probably been the MVP aside from
all right, I'm convinced.
Aside from maybe like Cyclops and Cosmo have been really good in this as well, because if you got these big chonkers, like you don't want them to get killed.
So Cosmo, my favorite thing to do with Cosmo is if you're playing a Shuri Red Skull, if they snap you on turn 4, I usually stay in and try and snipe Shuri with the Cosmo, and it's usually you have a pretty good idea where they're going to want to play it, behind armor or whatever. And Cosmo's just really great at stealing games.
I sniped one the other day as well, where they played Shuri successfully, and I was like, oh crap. But like because the Shuri Red Skull deck is so telegraphed, it's like, okay, well, then they're gonna play Red Skull, or like, I mean, basically, if they play Red Skull, then you win. If they play Vision, then you lose, right? And they played Red Skull, and I dumped Cosmo into the other lane. I'm like, fine, you can't Taskmaster now. I win. Like, okay. And so Cosmo was good as well. You have to be careful because some things can shut off magic if you're playing against a Thanos player or a Legion player, but there's not a ton of those.
And I'll tell you, my win rate with Thanos control, even though it's fallen out of favor, has been higher over a significantly greater percentage of games than this deck. But I like I said, as the week wore on, my brain got more and more turned to mush, and so I tried playing some of that Hawk Bounce deck and realized it was going to be even harder to play than Thanos. So yeah, back on this, I'll give Leech a try. I think honestly, Shuri is probably still a better deck, but this might catch people off guard. Might be better into bots, and perhaps maybe if you want to try something even a little bit different, but still win, you can try taking out Infinite, which Infinite's very, very stiff. Try to go for that Abomination Man thing line like Zombie was talking about. That sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, what do you? I mean, what do you run instead of? I'm curious to see like a different. Yeah, Zombies. What is
your? So I posted in the Discord. If you guys want to pull it up, it's
Hazmat.
It's so I love this brew to death. It's super duper fun.
What in the only world thing is this abomination here?
It's an evolved werewolf. So there are a few caveats to this deck. If you run into Destroy, or if you run into like a Lockjaw, or any deck that doesn't play very many cards, this deck gets very sad very quickly. Like this is very much a take advantage of your opponent playing cards kind of deck. But against those decks, it does rather well because you have a lot.
Luke Cage, right?
Not from this one. This one, okay. Because of Hazmat, you can't afford to. In the other build that I was talking about, it's basically just like your build, but you drop Infinite and Shocker for Man-Thing and Abomination. It's basically the same exact list. Just 2 cards different. This is a totally different list. This is more... If you want to play high Evo, but like you want to do it differently, like you want it to feel different, this is the deck to play. It's really fun. The Snow Guard stuff has actually been really relevant for like location control, which has been really nice. It also gives you more on reveals, but it's a werewolf deck, right? Like you play the werewolf and you have a whole lot of on reveals. Wasp, free on reveal, afflicts a card. Nico, on reveal. Snow Guard, on reveal. They're all on reveal cards.
Yeah. Green Goblin's
really good with werewolf because it doesn't fill up your board. It fills up your opponent's board. It moves the werewolf. Man-Thing has been spectacular. Like I think this deck got better because of the Shang change because now your Abomination can't get Shang-Chi. That was one of the biggest issues this had was that. And you're basically just giving your opponent negative power. If you're up against a Loki, you kind of just have to pray they don't get your Luke Cage. That's if they don't get your Luke Cage, I think they often have a very hard time winning that match because like they play a lot of cards and you're just punishing them for playing a lot of cards, whether that be with Man-Thing or Cyclops or Hazmat, Goblin. Like it's just been good. But I will say when you run into that Destroy deck or that Ramp deck that's not any deck that's not playing a lot of cards, this feels really really rough because part of the power you're trying to leverage is giving negative power to things, and if they aren't developing a lot of cards, you can't do that very effectively. But it's very fun. It's if you want like a different take on Evo.
What did you cut in the other list? You cut Infinite.
I cut the Infinite and I cut the Shocker for Abomination and Man-Thing.
We were running Shocker in our other one.
You cut the one you
the
were
Rogue
playing.
Then you had a Rogue, right?
Yeah. All right.
Basically, those are the tech spots. I actually don't hate Infinite. It's just like it's hard to find room for everything. And I found I was getting enough power between She-Hulk and Abomination and Hulk.
Are there enough?
Where I felt like I didn't need it.
Are there enough on reveals in here for Werewolf to be good? I see the comment in chat, and I just thought,
there are a million.
There's about half, right? It's like 7 because
Wasp, Nico, Snow Guard. Snow Guard gives you 2 more.
Uh-huh.
Hazmat, Shocker, Goblin. Yeah. The werewolf. This has actually been one of the decks that I've found has been most consistent in enabling the werewolf, because you just always have on reveal cards in your hand for the most part.
And you were theorizing in NHL that just in general, Green Goblin might be good with werewolf in other contexts as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with the best shell with it off the top of my head. Nothing come to mind yet, but I would be very wary of that combo showing up in more decks now. It looks very dangerous and very strong.
It's nuts. And in the mirror, oh my god, it's so frustrating in the mirror, because you lose a board space, and then losing a board space is so valuable because that's one less turn you're able to move the werewolf around, and then it's harder for you to fight for that space. And Goblin is very, very good with werewolf. I do wonder if you can ever fit it into the Darkhawk version, because I feel like that deck is tougher on slots than like Loki or this version. I feel like you have a little bit more room, whereas the Darkhawk, you have more other stuff that naturally goes into the deck. But Goblin has been very impressive with werewolf. It's just like you clog up their board, you move the werewolf without clogging up your own board. That on its own is just good.
The main thing that we aren't really hitting on, the most obvious effect, is like you can have 3 cards in a location. Play Green Goblin. It'll go to the other side, and then werewolf will come to the middle to that location.
Yeah,
because the spot is open. That's what's so powerful about this.
For sure.
Usually werewolf wouldn't be able to move, but now it's letting you move werewolf to that location. Trying to think where, like, it reminds me of the Black Bolt Stature combo that was played for a little while, and especially in Darkhawk decks. Very innocent looking 2-card combo that turned out to be super powerful and very synergistic. It just slots in someplace. This has a little bit more setup because Werewolf by Night needs more support cards. But if it finds the proper shell, yeah, this is going to get nerfed. Right now, Werewolf is fine, and then we got to this point, and maybe
you heard it here first. Werewolf is going to get nerfed because of Green Goblin. I've had it played against me a lot. I think a lot of people are catching on to it.
It's been around, only in the Loki version. It's been around. Right. I think KM was the one who popularized it, maybe a week after Werewolf came out or something. I think we're going to see something similar with Loki here, where because of the deck being harder to play, it's not going to be as much of an outlier in the stats as it would otherwise be. And then when you add the layer of, hey, this is a Series 5 card on top of it, in a month where, I don't know, people were interested in, there were a lot of cards people wanted in September, and then a little bit less in October. But I think people were there were a lot of people who didn't have the spotlight caches to get Werewolf, missed out on it. So I'd be surprised if it rose to that point right away, even if the power level's there. But maybe when it comes, because I think Werewolf is coming back in late December, so maybe by then it will be more refined, more people will be confident in picking it up, especially if it hasn't been nerfed by then. People will be like, all right, I feel confident. And that would be kind of ironic if it ended up getting nerfed because people finally picked it up and bumped up the play rate. But for the time being, it seems fine. But yeah, Goblin, that's definitely one you should be trying in the Werewolf decks. It's been really, really impressive just about every time I've played it in a Werewolf deck.
So we're kind of running down to the end of our time. I think that the summary is, decks that are meta right now. Loki, you've got obviously the Miss Marvel lockdown deck. Shuri Red Skull, High Evo are perfectly fine choices. Bounce kind of sits alongside Loki. So I think there's some reasonable choices to play. Obviously, there are more decks that are playable than the ones we've mentioned, but those are kind of the ones that are seeing the most play with the highest win rate. I think that as the releases come, we're going to see some change in that. Annihilus is one that's I think a lot of people are looking forward to, whether we think it'll be impactful or not remains to be seen. But I thought maybe we'd take the last 10 minutes and take a look further ahead than the rest of this month. Look at some of the upcoming cards that were revealed and kind of give some thoughts on, they are for this month. Never mind. I am clearly overtired. So, we had Miss Marvel come out, and this month we have Gladiator, Annihilus, and Martyr. And while I think that Martyr hasn't been one that's conjured much excitement, there's been a lot of talk around Gladiator. So maybe we can start with that.
This is also before we start. This is outdated. This is Drewberry does a great job with these graphics, but these are from the old data mine. So actually, all 3 cards on this list have been changed. So
Wow.
Gladiator's a 3/7, Annihilus is a 5/7, Martyr's a 1/4. Those are the current iterations of the cards. These are from when they were data mined, but a bit further out.
Yeah, my bad. We get these early, and so we.
No, it's fine. I just want people to know.
Oh no, I appreciate
the difference with Gladiator is a world of difference. I think at 3/8 it was overpowered, and at 3/7 it's probably mediocre to bad. But it's interesting nonetheless.
So I mean, again, we have to couple card releases with game economy because the two are inseparable. Yeah. So just quickly around, are you going to be opening 4 spotlights or spending 6,000 tokens next week, tomorrow, when Gladiator gets released?
Not unless people pick him up and do some really busted stuff with him. I'm planning on passing on Gladiator. Annihilus is the week for me. It has the Rian Gonzalez variants, which I like to collect. Annihilus, I think, is far and away the best non-pass card of the month. It's not even remotely close in my eyes. And he also just seems like the most fun and archetype enabling. Though I will say the mirror matches are going to get really silly. And we might finally see me and Blue's favorite card, Ghost, see a little bit of play. Because Ghost seems like it would be an absolute powerhouse in a Annihilus mirror match. To make sure your Annihilus is going last. And then Martyr's really bad. I think at 1/4 Martyr is one of the worst cards in the game. So not planning on picking that one up. I might YOLO a Spotlight for that 2099 variant, even though he's bad too.
You like that variant?
It's a Rian, that's why.
It's the Rian Gonzalez one. I just want to collect them.
Oh,
it
okay.
is. It
doesn't really look like a Rian
I don't
variant.
really like that week at all. Like I don't like the Gene variant, and I don't want Martyr. But hey, the last time I gambled, I got the Rian Spider Ham. So
don't do what Zombies does. Don't say, "Oh,
do as I say, not as I do." Don't open it. But yeah, the only good week looks like Annihilus to me. I think the rest of them are a wash, unless if you didn't get the Loki season pass, Gladiator's probably a pretty good week getting Mirage and Loki together.
Can we talk about how Gladiator works? So he's a 3/8. It says on reveal
3/7.
3/7. Sorry. On reveal, add a card from your opponent's deck to their side of this location. If it has less power, destroy it. Okay. So I play Gladiator on my side. It's a 3/7. It yanks a card out of their deck and pops it on the board opposite of where I played Gladiator. And if it has 8, and if it has 7 or more, it stays. If it has 6 or less, it gets nuked.
Correct. If it's under 7, it dies. Ongoing effects do go off. So if it rips a Darkhawk, that Darkhawk is going to beat the Gladiator. Or Null, or whatever, or Devil Dino. Those win. On reveal happens regardless. Yeah, X would live. On reveal happens regardless. So if it rips Dr. Doom, those Doom bots come out, and then Doom dies.
So it's gonna. So on reveal effects happen. Ongoing effects happen prior to Gladiator.
Prior to his effect resolving. It's kind of like they're.
So would it kill X if ongoing happens before the trigger? Because
ongoing happens before the fight trigger, and X prevents cards from being added or removed. So X pops out, his ongoing goes in. Because when Darkhawk pops out, he gets his stats, and then they fight. X pops out, he gets his ability, then they fight, but nothing can die.
Yeah, all right.
Which I think it's bad. At 3/8, I think it would have actually been really, really strong, especially if Shang-Chi still hit 9 power, because then you could say, hey, I get a 3/8, which is insane stats, and then if I low roll, I'll just Shang-Chi to clean it up, because it would have to be like... It would most likely be 9 or above. Now with the Shang-Chi nerf and him losing a point from that initial data mine, I just think I think it was Quinny that brought up in my chat, like at that point, you're risking a lot for an additional essentially 2 points of stats. Why wouldn't I just play like a good 3/5 instead of a risky 3/7? And I'm kind of on board with that mentality where it's like, I think I'd rather just play a 3/5 that generally doesn't have a significant downside rather than like, because if you low roll on Gladiator, sometimes you're just gonna lose on the spot, and I don't think it's winning you enough games to make up for those times it's losing you games.
This card is the epitome of something we talked about earlier, I think, where if a card is printed, it's either really, really good or really, really bad. And before the changes with the leaked data mine versions, we thought it would be busted.
Oh yeah, 3/8. It looks so OP. It looks so OP out of 3/8. I think.
Yeah, now it's just terrible, and I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up buffing it.
Yeah, maybe it does go back to 3/8.
Yeah, the Shang-Chi change is the real issue,
mm-hmm.
right? Because that was where the synergy came from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't see a point in playing this.
You're just not getting enough. You're like, the risk isn't worth the reward, right? That's kind of what it comes down to me. It's like, even if you want to hold for the last turn and just play like an impactful 3-drop in Surfer for stats, at that point just play Maximus, because you don't care about Maximus on the last turn. The effect doesn't do anything for the most part, right?
That's the thing, right? So to get risk versus reward cards to work, you need to have synergies, and those synergies usually get rid of the risks as much as possible.
Exactly.
Before, with Gladiator, the synergy that got rid of the risk was Shang-Chi. Now it doesn't do that. So you don't have any way to mitigate the risk. So why take the risk in the first place?
Yeah, because the stats aren't breaking the game like this. Like, because when you lose out, and especially if you lose out on an 8 power or 9 power or a card that affects the rest of the board, like Doom. Like, think about all the cards that are seeing play right now. I don't see a world where this has more upside than downside. Like, there's so many bad pulls right now, and like, are the times you don't get a bad pull really worth the times that you do? I don't think so.
No.
The animation's funny though. We can say that he's like swearing and it's all like marked out when he pulls a card that he can't beat. So that's a win. Fun animation, but not a great card. It really is interesting just how some small changes can have a very larger impact, because we did think this card was busted at 3/8 with old Shang-Chi.
There's a lore element here that's actually really funny. If you will, like, just bear with me for like 30 seconds. It's great, right? So in the comics, he's like Superman level power, right? Like super powerful, but in super weird comic book fashion, his power is related to his confidence level, which is super strange, right? So if he's not confident, his power like really dips. And so you can see, right, you flip a card that's less powerful than them, he's like, bam, I got it. And you flip a card that's more powerful, and he's like, oh crap.
That's pretty funny.
So funny.
Lore win. Well, hey, at least they got the lore correct. Yeah. The card might not be good, but the flavor's on point.
There you go. We don't really like those, but it's funny. So there you go. I did some reading up on the lore for this one.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's cool, but I don't think I think if you're considering this card at all, just wait a bit and see what people do with it. Let someone who, you know, does the content thing for a living be the guinea pig. Don't waste your hard-earned tokens, or if you're going to use your cashes, at least be going for like the better cards in the bunch. Like if you skip Loki.
Yeah,
whatever.
See, this is the problem is, like, I've got Mirage, I've got Loki. Like, I kind of want to play with Gladiator, but like I don't have extra tokens sitting around. I've got like 5,000 or something.
Yeah, it's just not worth.
And I don't want to use my caches for variants for cards that I already have. Like, I don't even really like those variants very much. They're fine, but they're not like I felt good doing it on a week when it was for Man-Thing, I think, because I was missing Silver Samurai and Lady Deathstrike. And even though like they're not the greatest cards, I didn't have them. It was like, cool, I'm getting
you got something new to mess with, right? And that's the big issue I think we see constantly circling around, and one that I think they really have to tackle is the game feels the spotlight system feels really punishing when the closer you are to collection complete, because like you and like me, there are very few weeks where I'm getting 2 cards because I don't own all the cards. I'm missing like a few, but there's so few and far between that it's like I don't get these weeks where I can get 2 cards. And even as someone who likes variants, like, well, I already have a Loki and a Mirage that I like, so I don't really see, you know, what, $50 worth of Spotlight cash value and getting a cosmetic I might not even use. I'd rather get a card with that. But the system is designed in such a way where it makes it really difficult. And I think they could fix that almost entirely if they just fixed the random slot and made that more likely to give you a card that you don't own, right? Like, maybe I would go for the let's say the Martyr week because I want the variant if that random slot wasn't guaranteed to be garbage, because the odds of it pulling an actual card for me are very, very small because I'm only missing what, like 3 cards or something. So the chance of pulling, you know, one of those 3 cards out of like I don't know, 50 plus cards is so low.
I've pulled a Nebula two months in a row. I'm not joking. I wish I was joking. Like first flip, Nebula, yep. and then tokens. Both times. It's like, you gotta be joking me. Like
it feels really bad and whatnot, and especially with this is something probably we'll talk about on the next show, I would imagine, as we get closer to December. They're going to be increasing the rate at which cards come out. There's not going to be this off week with the season pass anymore. They're going to be doing a new card during the week the pass comes out. And that's going to really ramp up the amount of cards in the game by a lot. That's 12 more cards a year. That's a lot in a game that only does, 50 something cards, 60 cards in a year or something, depending on the weeks. So it's like it's that I think that's going to be a topic for next time, but it's going to be interesting to see. I think something has to give if they're going to be ramping up. Like, I think more cards is good. I think the game can use more cards, but you can't make that change without also making it
no series drops
to get cards because like the people are already, as we're talking about now, having trouble staying up with cards they want. Like, you'd like to get Gladiator, but if you have to use up to 4 Spotlight caches just to get this one new card, and then maybe that prevents you from getting the next week's card, it's like becomes a very tough situation, especially when Annihilus looks really, really strong compared to Gladiator, who seems more fun but memey kind of, right? Like, I'll probably play this in a Silver Surfer deck, maybe, but like it's not making an archetype. It's not going to be an addition to a deck that completely changes what a deck does. It just doesn't do that. Whereas that's why you're probably going to see most people spend on Annihilus, because people really value decks that are cards that make a whole archetype, right? We saw it with High Evo and Thanos. Like, those cards are traditionally the most popular cards in the game because people get a whole deck out of one card, and you normally aren't getting that. So I think Annihilus is going to be the big one. Are you guys planning on picking that one up?
Yeah, but only because I want the 2 variants, so I'm just going to open 4. Well, I'll open 3 chests if I get the 2 variants in the card, and 4 to get one of each. But if it wasn't for the Dakin and the X23 reinvariants, I don't know. I don't think that Annihilus is bad. It's just I don't think it's a card that Junk is not particularly a strategy that I tend to play. So, but I'm gonna pick
it's
up
not
that
everyone's
week.
cup of tea for sure. I've always loved Junk decks from way back when Sentry came out and trying to make him work. But I think it's cool that they're finally getting more support because it's a neat archetype. Although the mirror matches seem like they're going to be awful, but I mean that happens. It's a thing.
Yeah, so I'll be getting that week. Martyr week, no. Gladiator week, no. And if for whatever reason I have to buy a Gladiator because it turns out that you were wrong and it's busted even at 3/7, that's gonna probably be a token buy.
Yeah, because even if you wanted to get it, you don't really want the Mirage or the Loki.
I've got the Mirage. I've got a Peach Momoko variant for Mirage, which is awesome. And Loki, I mean, I don't have a variant for Loki, but like I've seen some of the variants that are coming out from Loki, and I prefer to have one of those. I like the Sylvie one and the vote for Loki one. I kind of like the vote for Loki one. It's pretty cute. But anyways, yeah, I'll be skipping.
What about you, Nate? What are you thinking?
I don't know. I'm so bummed because I want to play Gladiator, but like I was looking for a week that had stuff that like I needed the other cards, and there's just not any of those weeks like this whole month. And so I'll probably end up getting a Nihilist because the card is good, or looks good at least. It'll be interesting and I want to play with it. Like, I don't know. I almost feel like you want to play Gladiator in like a Cosmo deck, right? Or a Shuri deck. I guess not Shuri because that doesn't work like that. But anyways, I want to play with them, and it's just a shame to look at these and be like, I'm not spending 4 caches on that because I already have the other cards, and so I'm probably just gonna end up waiting until December or whenever there's months with like variants that are coming out for these, so I can get the original card as a backup. Because I don't know. I mean, the spotlight caches are too rare of a resource to use, or the keys now, right? They changed the keys. I've got like 6 maybe, but like if I have to use 4 to
then you're like
to get a
you're
Nihilist,
in a rough spot. It's not.
So you just have to.
Great.
Yeah, you gotta be careful. So I don't know. I kind of sit and wait. I love the Rian Gonzalez ones, and I really like particularly the X23 variant there. And so whatever. I wouldn't be bummed if I pulled those, but the game is way pricey, and I'm probably just gonna sit and wait and get them later when there's a week that's got more stuff that I need, so that I don't feel as bad when I low roll.
Yeah, it rewards you when you have a fuller collection. You essentially get rewarded for engaging with new releases less, which really, I can't imagine that's like an effective model. Maybe it is. Maybe it's effective in getting people to pony up.
Are based off of, right?
Yeah, it's like it's silly.
They'll give better deals to win new business than their loyal customers.
I didn't even ask, but I assume that these are all releasing as Series 5, right?
Martyr's a Series 4, but the rest
because
are Series
she's
5.
Garbage.
But... yeah, she's really bad. They've been doing, and then I think, let me look really quick. I think December is full Series 5. That could technically change when we get the next patch, but like, oof, it's looking kind of rough. Like I really hoped when they announced like, hey, I feel like they started off strong with releasing new Series 4 cards, and they have just gradually slowed it over time. It's been not that great. What about you, NHL? Are you picking up any of the other cards this month?
I'll keep it simple. If the card performs well and it encourages something I like to play, then I'll get it.
So maybe a Nihilist. Because you like junk, right?
I haven't really been a junk player, no. But I think that's mostly because the archetype has
so bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll probably try if a Nihilist makes that deck good. But I do have my doubts, so we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, it pays to save in this game. I mean, that's why that's why I didn't buy Black Knight. Like, I thought he was a fun card I would like to play with, and I'm like, oh, he's in December, and that means I'll have a week in December where I get 2 cards instead of 1. So I guess I'll just wait and not buy the card right away.
Yeah,
I don't want to spend the resources on it.
Yeah, it's a bummer. Like looking into December, like. Even here, I've got these cards, and so except the Black Knight is the only one I'm missing.
Yeah, so Celine's probably the week for you. That's my week too. Where Celine, if a Nihilist is good, Celine is going to be amazing in a Nihilist.
What that essentially means is that we're not getting any new cards for 2 months. Like,
well, you're getting new cards,
but you can. It's just you have to open up and throw a lot of money at second dinner.
Gotta use the credit card.
Yeah, the most OP card in the game. But yeah, it's definitely discouraging. Like they really need to find some way to make the spotlight system feel less bad for people who have a lot of the cards, because I think that's a huge flaw in it. But I'm worried that that flaw is working well enough to their advantage that they don't want to change it, because what it's doing is essentially pushing people into spending money on bundles so they get tokens or more spotlights so that way they can get the new card. And I think the people who are already at that point are more likely to do that because if you have most of the cards, you're probably pretty invested in the game, right? So I'm worried that they won't see it as a necessity. They'll see it as rather it's a feature, not a bug, kind of deal. But hey, at least Iron Lad's coming back. Is that updated here? This might also be this is slightly out of date, I think. They changed it, so they got rid of Deathstrike and they got rid of Man-Thing, and they replaced them with Living Tribunal and Iron Lad, respectively. So that was at least one piece of feedback that has been taken, is that people were really annoyed that these cards have been, because those cards appeared in July when Spotlights came out, June, July, and they've never been back, and people have been frustrated because they're Series 5 cards, they're both very unique, they aren't replaceable, and people just can't get them. Like, I can't tell you how many times I get the comment of, oh, this deck has Iron Lad, guess I can't play it.
Deck has Man-Thing, I can't play it.
So it's unfortunate, but it's nice that those cards are coming back for the people who didn't get them. And yeah, I really hope at some point I feel like they have to do something if they're introducing another card for the month, because it's already so hard to keep up. I think this is going to... I really feel like this is going to be the thing that makes people who are even spending a decent bit of money feel kind of stretched a little thin, because it's already expensive, and this is adding to that. Because it's a whole nother week of spotlights, and I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with it.
It really bothers me that every time we talk about anything relating to Marvel Snap, it goes back to the game economy. The overall price, and I'm not saying that you're wrong to bring it up or do so. I think that's
it just can't be avoided, and it's a shame, right? Like I can't. It's impossible to judge these cards without the price, because I can't just say, "Hey, this looks like a fun card. Pick it up if it seems fun to you," when that could prevent you from getting like an actually good card that month. And unfortunately, that's the things you have to keep in mind, because the game is designed in a way where it's their stated goal. They don't want you having all the cards. The uncollectible card game. They don't want you to have all the cards. And that, as card game people, and maybe this can be its own topic further down the line in the future, is I think Snap actually does a whole lot to alienate people who are traditional card game players, and that's not their target demographic, and I don't think it ever will be, because they make enough money and have enough players off of this just being a fun little casual phone game with one of the biggest intellectual properties that exists right now. And they don't feel like they need to cater to the niche card game market, because they felt like they needed to cater to us in beta when that was their whole player base, because it was only card gamers who played the beta for the most part. But now that they have, millions of users, I think I saw a stat showing I think it was new installs, and I think this game is still getting 1 million installs a month or something absurd. It's kind of crazy. It's easy to not think about that stuff when, we're in kind of the bubble of the people who are very engaged, but that's pretty crazy to me.
If you remember back to when you first started, the game is very friendly to beginners, and like you've said many times, the bigger your collection gets, the more unfriendly it is, essentially. And so I could see it bringing in a lot of people. It's very fun at the beginning when you're unlocking new stuff left and right, and it's oh, hey, this is great. And then you even hey, I can pump a couple bucks into this, why not? I'm unlocking so much stuff, cool. And then you hit a brick wall, and it's oh, now I'm at the point where we collectively are the most invested players in the game, and we're barely unlocking cards because the economy is so bad that it's and the resources are either so expensive or so rare or both, that it's I've got to guard them choose very wisely. And so even though there's new cards coming out, my collection is so full, and I can't take the risk of getting stuff that I already have, that I'm just going to wait several months after a new card comes out to like maybe get it when it's bundled with something else I don't have, to or a variant that I want. Like that's crazy.
You gotta imagine at some point they're going to see diminishing returns with like the player base who's in that portion. But I think we're at a point right now where they're just not seeing that yet, and they're making enough off the people who are having that better experience lower down. And if you think about it, by speeding up the rate at which cards are coming out, the people who have less cards will benefit from this system longer, because they'll keep like. That's why they view like people missing cards as like a benefit, because it improves their system, right? And we're the people they don't like care for, because we're trying to do the thing they don't want us to do, which is having all the cards in their card game. And it's silly, as people who are like, have played a bunch of card games and like card games. You like having access to all the cards so you can play different things, have variety, experiment. But that just doesn't feel like what they want for people to experience the game. Or if you do want to experience the game that way, they want you to pay a lot of money for it. And like, I know I've personally cut back quite a bit on spending money on the game, and I've just been coasting off of prior resources, because it's a lot to keep up with. Like, as a content creator, you'd think be more excited for like, oh, Gladiators tomorrow, I'm excited to try that card out. Like, I don't think I can justify 6K tokens or spotlights on that card, even with a bunch saved up, because I know there's going to be a month. Like, who knows what the future holds, and all it takes is 1 month of really good cards, like we saw in September with the Loki season, and that depletes a lot of your resources. So, like, it makes you hoard, and that's just not very fun. Hoarding resources isn't very fun. They've acknowledged it to not be fun, and yet that's kind of what they promote now, because it's more effective and efficient to hoard than it is to just
now
open
you
things.
have keys instead of spotlight caches, so that you can now hoard more effectively.
Well, they did that so people wouldn't trigger them on accident anymore.
Yeah,
but
that was a good change, I think.
Oh, no, I mean, I agree, but it's still like they're acknowledging.
Now hoarding's part of the game, right?
No, no, they're fully acknowledging that hey,
it's
now,
weird.
Now you save them up and use them when you want to, versus encouraging you to use them as you get them, which I think they were before.
Oh, they were totally doing that before. And and there are, I think, more casual people who probably did just rip the spotlight once a week when they got it, and they got what they got. And
they got what they got.
So I don't know, it's weird, but we could talk about this for a long time. It's unfortunately not something that's likely to change.
I hate to be the buzzkill, but we are officially out of time. But I think it was a good conversation nonetheless, one that I particularly feel quite impassioned about, because I just, like you, want to enjoy the game and not focus on the cost of it. So NHL, want to thank you for joining us. I know it's quite late where you are, but it's always a pleasure to have you to chat Snap with, or card games in general. So thank you for joining us. And thank you, Zombies and Nate, for taking the time to be here, but also for agreeing to do this on a Monday night, which was mostly to my benefit, since my schedule has been all over the place. So appreciate that as well. If there's one ask that I have of you, the audience, is try to be kind to the people you interact with on Ladder and on Twitter or any other social media. I feel like there's a lot of animosity, and we here believe in the philosophy of keeping it Cosmo and trying to treat others with kindness and compassion. So, thank you for listening and for being here. And we'll catch you in 2 weeks, and we'll have some new cards to talk about. And until then, keep it Cosmo. Take care, everyone.
Keep it Cosmo.
Keep it Cosmo.
Enough said, bub.